It no longer appears to be a matter of when. It really feels like a matter of when this is all going to happen. That's exactly what appears to be going on here. Pete Mundo with you, Heartland College Sports Weekly. It's great to have you on board. Thanks for joining us as we get this show rolling. And, I'm thinking about what's going on right now in the ACC. And I'm thinking to myself, all the Big 12 needs to do is sit there and hang tight. That's it. And by the way, as I started the show, I was listening to my daughter bang on the floor above me, and I think I totally screwed up my opening line. But whatever. I'm doing a live show. We're here on YouTube. And you know what? You get what I was going for. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when with the ACC. But I hear her banging upstairs. And I'm like, okay, that totally messed up my mojo to start this thing. But you know what? It's great to be here. It's the off season. We're talking college football in June, and I couldn't be happier. I hope you feel the same way. It is hot as could be across the entire Midwest. I don't know about you, but I'm sitting here in Kansas City. It's 94 degrees right now. It's like, nighttime on a Sunday, and we're all just sweating bullets. Not me, I'm inside, but I took the dog for a 5-minute walk. It's miserable out there. So as we get this day started, I am dreaming of that 56-degree, beautiful, sunny, slight breeze, late October college football Saturday. That's what I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about how great it is for the Big 12 Conference to find itself in this position of power, to find itself in a place where it can know it is of the Power Four conferences far and away number 3. It's not the Big Ten. It's not the SEC. I'm not going to sit here and convince you that it is, but it certainly is head and shoulders above the ACC. So we now have had 2 very credible reports here in the last few days. One coming on our show last week from Tim Brando. If you missed that, subscribe to the YouTube page or the podcast, and you'll find the Tim Brando interview there. And Tim Brando went off on what a mess the ACC is. And he's spot on about that, by the way. And then over the weekend, our good buddy Josh Pate, who also was on this show just a few weeks ago, he talked about how, according to his sources, ACC Reconstruction is imminent, his words, meaning the ACC's future is very much up in the air. And it makes all the sense in the world. There are currently 5 lawsuits pending involving the ACC. You don't hear a lot about that. I mean, you do if you follow the right people and stuff, but I still feel like we've got a power conference that is in 5 different lawsuits, and I feel like it still doesn't get the attention that it should. But there are 5 different lawsuits out there involving the ACC. There's Florida State versus the ACC in Tallahassee. There is the ACC v. Florida State in North Carolina. There is Clemson versus the ACC in South Carolina. There's the ACC versus Clemson in North Carolina. And there is the Florida Attorney General versus the ACC. All 5 of those lawsuits right now are pending. They're all out there. They're all happening as we speak. All 5 of them. So you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, Pac-12 never got this bad. The Big 12 certainly never got this bad. The Pac-12 does not exist anymore. And it never got as bad as the ACC with 5 pending lawsuits. The Big 12 with all the upheaval. You go back to Nebraska, Mizzou, Colorado, A&M. Never had something like this going on. OU and Texas, they just woke up one day and decided to bail. I suppose that was their prerogative. But it never got this public, and it never got this bad. So you've got these 5 lawsuits out there. You have very credible college football voices, friends of this show, Tim Brando, Josh Pate, outwardly talking about how the ACC is not for long. So now you sit there and you say, okay, if you're a Big 12 fan, what does this mean? What it means right now is that the Big 12, and I believe Brett Yormark is doing this, is going to stay aggressive. And that means capitalize when the opportunity presents itself specifically as it refers to potential expansion. That's the end game here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and start going through expansion rumors left and right, but I will give you this quote that was given to John Kurtz, who does some work covering K-State in the Big 12. Athletic director Gene Taylor told him on the KC Sports Network, I'll read the quote here, "I think as a conference, we need to stay aggressive." So right now, the Sharks are circling. Brett Yormark, the ADs, the team presidents, everybody is circling. They smell cliche, but they smell the blood in the water. That's what's happening right now. Everybody sees it. Everybody knows what's going on. So now you look at it and you say to yourself, how can the Big 12 maximize things today? Right now, it's lining things up as they see fit. It's getting that private equity involved. It's potentially getting naming rights. Instead of Heartland College Sports covering the Big 12, it's going to be Heartland College Sports covering the All-State 12, the Buc-ee's 12, the, Trojan 12. Pick your favorite company that we haven't mentioned yet. Throw it out there. I don't care. You get the point. Okay? That's step one. Line the Big 12 up to be as attractive as possible to any potential addition. And there will be opportunities. Now, as Peyton Brando have also noted on this show and elsewhere, the ACC is not going to implode by the start of the college football season. We are 10 Saturdays away from week 1. It's not going to happen then. But we could start getting news on the ACC, on where things are going in that conference in the weeks and months ahead. Possibly, as Pate notes, before the start of the college football season. So that's what we're watching right now. This thing's not going to blow up today. It's not going to blow up tomorrow or next week. But with 5 pending lawsuits out there, and that's the number that matters, you've got a situation right now where it is wildly unstable. And a large part of it is the top teams, the Florida States, the Clemsons, the North Carolinas, do not want to be stuck with this ACC contract through 2036. And, Jim Phillips is starting to have, to me, a little bit of George Kliavkoff in him. George Kliavkoff is the former Pac-12 commissioner who oversaw the destruction of that league. And by that, I mean, he's coming off in some interviews through some of his statements as a bit naive. And there's one that stood out to me here from Jim Phillips. And some of this stuff just really makes you shake your head. Jim Phillips saying here to the Charlotte News Observer, "We're going to fight. I'm going to fight. The courts will ultimately decide. And we believe that everybody knows what was in that contract back then." He's talking about the ACC contract they signed 7 or 8 years ago now. And it was celebrated. People were excited. A new network with ESPN. We just lost Maryland to the Big Ten. It was a chance for unity, togetherness, and the rest of it. And there was a unanimous acceptance of this is a great deal for the ACC. And that has changed in the minds of a couple. That's the quote from ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips to the Charlotte News Observer. You don't say, Jim. Yeah, a couple of minds did change there, buddy. And as a Big 12 guy, let me tell you what happens when a couple of big minds change. They say sayonara, they say see you later, they say adios, and you've got to figure out how to react. Hello, Texas. Hello, Oklahoma. That's what happens when a couple of your big dogs decide that their minds have changed. And if you think lawsuits and attorneys are going to protect you, that's not your best bet. I'm not saying you let them walk, but if you are a guy like Jim Phillips, well, you better fight. And you better think about what's next. And I'm sorry, but SMU and Stanford and Cal ain't it. And by the way, you're not paying them anything anyway. Stanford and Cal are getting like $8 million a year for the next few years, and SMU is not getting anything for almost a decade. But don't worry. Don't feel bad for SMU. They announced that they raised a record-breaking $159 million for the 23-24 fiscal year at SMU. It's good to have donors of that size at a place like SMU because they are not collecting anything from the ACC. I'm not sure how long SMU is going to even be in a power conference because I don't know how long the ACC is going to be around. But setting that aside, Jim Phillips is not coming off like a guy who's in charge of his own league. Just doesn't. It doesn't sound to me like a guy who's confident. He doesn't sound to me like he's a guy who really gets where this sport is going and recognizing the reality of what's happening in front of our very own eyes, which is his league becoming the latest one to collapse. And if we do get to a weird power 2.5, where it's the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12, at that point, are we really just looking at this as a power league? And that's where the conversation needs to go. If we continue this consolidation and the Big 12 goes to 2024, the SEC, the Big 10 push 20, are we really just looking at 50 to 60 teams in a power league that then becomes a minor league NFL, at least in football? Is that basically what we have? And then the question becomes this. Does consolidation amongst those 50 to 60 teams make sense to save expenses on travel? Do we basically go back to where we were 25 to 30 years ago, where there's 50-ish power teams and they're within their own, let's say, divisions that 25 to 30 years ago we would have called conferences? The old Big 8 is a division. The old Southwest Conference is a division. The old Big 10, the old ACC, the old SEC. I could see a world, and it's not happening tomorrow, next week, next year, anything like that, but I could see a world in 10 years where basically we're back where we were 30 years ago, where the old conferences are now divisions under this umbrella of, a new college football entity that has nothing to do with the NCAA, by the way. That's what I could see the future being. And it would be weird if and when that happens, but it will also make a hell of a lot of sense if and when that day ever comes, because I don't see a world where we're going to have Oregon traveling to Rutgers, Rutgers traveling to UCLA, BYU going to UCF, UCF going to Arizona, and eventually people are going to say, this doesn't make a lot of sense, even when you try to structure it to limit some of the travel as much as you can. It doesn't make sense for the student athletes, even though they're not really students anymore, but it doesn't make sense for them. Our costs are to the roof. What we did 30 years ago actually kind of worked. Now, the kicker, of course, is what? Money. How do you break down the money? And here's how you break down the money. This is what you do. If we ever get to that point in a decade, here's how you break down the money. You find some equitable way to pay out all the teams, some kind of base level, cost that covers all the Power 5 teams' needs, whatever that number is. And then you pay out based on success. You get to a college football playoff, boom, big check. You get to a national championship semifinal, check. Championship game, check. You win a national title, check. That's how you add to your bottom line. You actually succeed. Because one of the greatest grifts going right now in college sports is that Vanderbilt is paid the same as Alabama, and that Rutgers is paid the same as Ohio State. It's unbelievable. When you step back and you think about it, it's one of the stupidest things we have going in all of college sports. But nobody really cares. It's like, well, it's the Big Ten. So if you're lucky enough to be one of the members of the Big Ten or the SEC, even if you just absolutely blow as a program and you've sucked forever, It doesn't matter. You get your 60, 70, pushing eventually one day, $80 million a year just because you got lucky. That can't last forever. ESPN is not going to let that last forever. Fox is not going to let that last forever. They're not going to pay Rutgers $50, $60 million a year. And the only reason they're doing that is basically for the right to air Ohio State and Michigan. It doesn't make an ounce of sense to anybody who's got a functioning brain, but no one talks about it. No one talks about how Vanderbilt's getting $50 to $60 million a year for the right to air Alabama, Georgia. That's what's happening right now. Eventually, someone's going to wake up and says, why are we doing this? This is beyond stupid. We'll consolidate all of this into some power conference with some new entity, get rid of the NCAA. They're on the outs anyway. They're neutered and completely worthless for the most part. They put on a good basketball tournament, and that's about it. That's all they're good for anymore. You strip it all out. You get a new governing body that oversees NIL, transfer portal, new rules, new regulations. Maybe a unionized, that's a different conversation. And you get your 50, 60 teams. You pay them a baseline number, whatever that number is, and then you're paying out based on success. I don't know. Maybe it just makes too much sense to me. Maybe I'm just sitting here covering the Big 12 at Heartland College Sports and saying it makes sense. But it does. And by the way, if you're new to the show right now, please do hit that thumbs up button right below the video on YouTube. We so appreciate you doing that. Same thing on the podcast as well. Hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. And we always appreciate, of course, our radio affiliates joining us here on the show. So let me get to some of your stuff as we roll through YouTube Live. Pete, when you interviewed Tim Brando, I'm surprised you didn't realize that you sound just like a younger version of him. Well, that's very nice of you, home dog, West Virginia fan. I appreciate that, my man. Tim's a guy I've admired from afar for a long time. Back to I think about Tim back in the studio days at CBS. That's when I first started kind of following his career, but obviously it predates that. Great guy, friend of the show. He loves what we do here at Heartland College Sports, so he's a really good dude. Some of you looking for names here on the Big 12. The Bucky's Big 16. That's from Payson, BYU fan. I like that. Chief writes here, the Country Road Conference. Okay. The Country Road Truck Stop Conference. Okay. All right. I mean, we got some good stuff coming in. I'm good with that. What about this question here? Pete, could the ACC poach the Big 12? No. Why would a Big 12 team go to a conference right now that has 5 pending lawsuits where the biggest brands want to leave? And the newcomers are more or less worthless. And that would be Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Why would any Big 12 team in their right mind leave for that? The only way any of these Big 12 teams are leaving is if they do get one day an SEC or a Big 10 invite. But it's not obvious to me those conferences are moving anytime soon. In fact, I don't think they are. So, no, there is no path to the ACC poaching anybody. Hell, I mean, I'm not sure the Mountain West teams should want to leave for the ACC at this point. I don't. Pete, I hope it stays this way for a while. And then the Big 12 gets Louisville, Miami, NC State, and maybe Virginia Tech. There really are, I think, 5 ACC teams that are compelling for the Big 12. And obviously an odd number does not work. But the teams for the Big 12 that would make sense, if and when this day does come, just to have the conversation together, are those 4: Louisville, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, and then you have to have Pitt in that conversation. To me, the slam dunks are Pitt because of what it brings to the West Virginia rivalry, and you're in a top 30 media market. Virginia Tech, one of the most underrated environments in all of college football. NC State, growing area, growing region, get into that state. And then you have to flip the coin between Louisville and Miami. And it's amazing to think that Miami's not the slam dunk. I would lean Miami to get a school in the state with UCF. But I'll tell you right now, when you strip away the brand of Miami that we all know and many of us like myself grew up with during the Larry Coker years, what's Miami football? Right? I mean, what is Miami football? It's not impressive. You don't sit there and say to yourself, oh, yeah, that. I mean, really look at Miami football year in, year out for the better part of 20 years. It's unimpressive. So I know a lot of you are going to think to yourself, well, obviously you go Miami over Louisville. Do you, though? It's not. It's harder than you think. But I probably would lean Miami just because of South Florida, what it can be, getting UCF a travel partner if push came to shove on that front. That's what I would be looking at here as we move forward. All right. I'm reading these things on the fly right now as I go. This is from EI Crab. Pete, I love the new version, like the new version of the Big 12. Love each member. Not one bad school or team. Wish the league had a network. What are we? We're the network right here at Heartland College Sports. Come on, that's what we are. We're the network. You don't need a network. That's what we're for. But I think networks are, frankly, antiquated. I do think like the SEC network does have some good programming on there. If you're an SEC nut, they do SEC exclusive radio shows. You got the Paul Feinbaum show. You got some of the other weekend shows on there. You get some cool historical content. You get Olympic sports during the off season. You get game replays. Some of that stuff is cool. But remember, the cable bundle has collapsed. The network model that came to be when the SEC network was launched almost 15 years ago is an antiquated model. No one really wants that anymore. I mean, the SEC network's always going to exist because ESPN has dumped such incredible amounts of money into it and into the SEC. So their brand is so tied together. The SEC network is not going anywhere. They have to have the SEC network. But I really don't think the value of the network is what it was even 5 or 6 years ago. Those days have more or less gone. You're getting your content wherever you want to get it in a million different ways from a million different providers. Let me give you a great example. And I'm not saying this to knock the people that handle this show. But there is a show on ESPN Plus. I think it's called like Big 12 Now or Big 12 Weekly on ESPN Plus. And I'm familiar with some of the people involved in that show. And I know from some of the people I've spoken with, the numbers are horrible. I mean, we're doing better on our website, on our YouTubes, on our podcasts than they're doing on their Big 12 content that is promoted by the league and is provided by the league on, ESPN Plus and other platforms. That's not good. Now, part of it, I think, is because it got the wrong people in there. But frankly, I think you get a better, unbiased, entertaining, opinionated show right here than you did in this, fancy made-up studio show that was supposed to be like Big 12 Weekly, cover the conference, talk to some people. We're talking to as many people as we can in the league. We're doing it here, and you're consuming it. So it's not 2014. It's 2024, and people are just getting their content differently. And I think that you're going to see more of that going forward. It's not changing. Derek says, Pete, this is somewhat off topic, but if we restructured conferences and divisions back to a group of 50 to 60 power teams, then that conference should require each member school to have all the same major sports. How does Kansas have 3 D1 schools and no wrestling program at any of them? How do schools not have softball? This makes the conference schedules for non-football and basketball teams madness. Madness is a bit of an overstatement. I mean, the Big 12 baseball and the Big 12 softball schedules work out, right? Even though, some of them don't have baseball programs, some of them don't have softball programs. It's not madness. It's just like whatever. I don't know. I mean, I love you, Derek, but I don't think that matters. I don't. I think schools have programs that they feel they can have. And frankly, No one's adding sports anytime soon. Here's what's far more likely to happen. This is the underbelly of this entire mess with NIL and everything else going on right now in college football and college basketball to a lesser extent. Programs, athletic departments are running out of money. Travel is more expensive than ever. There will be a time, if this does not get cleaned up, where you will see Olympic sports getting slashed. You will see non-revenue sports getting slashed unless something improves and this entire situation fixes itself. Because all the money is getting sucked out by football and, to a lesser extent, basketball. The money is not going to be there for all these other sports. Never mind for these other sports to travel at the rate they now have to travel, which is why if you move the ball forward 10 years, suddenly it makes a lot more economical sense to basically say, you know what, maybe Oklahoma should just play, Nebraska like they did for 100 years. It's convenient for everybody. It's a great rivalry. It makes sense. It's a quick trip. Like, maybe that makes sense. Maybe it makes sense for Texas Tech to play Texas A&M instead of having Texas Tech have to travel to play West Virginia or UCF, to use another example in the Big 12. That's where the money at some point is going to get involved, where these teams and these programs and universities are going to say, we have to do something. I don't want to see them cut any of these sports, but long term, I don't see what other option they're going to have. The money's going to come in from the TV networks, but they're going to be sucking that dry and spending it faster than it can make it. And I think the NIL stuff, I don't know. You tell me. How long do you want to keep spending money on players who don't have an ounce of loyalty to your school? I love college football. I am not going anywhere when it comes to this sport that I love. That's the best sport in America. But I don't care if you're a guy donating $50 a month, or you're somebody who's donated $5,000 a month, or you've given a $500,000 check to your favorite program. How long are you going to keep doing that when everybody's just chasing the bag? When do you finally say, you know what, I've given enough? My tickets are more expensive. The beers are more expensive. By the way, everything in my life is more expensive. I'm not doing it. Like, I think at some point people are going to wipe their hands clean, and the schools are going to have to figure out how to pay players fairly based on the revenues they receive from things like TV deals, ticket sales, beer sales, or everything else. It can't be pay for the tickets, pay for the beer. We need the TV money. Oh, and we need you to fund the players. I don't think it's sustainable. And I don't know when or how, if it's some kind of, economic pullback or recession that makes people wake up to this insane game that's going on right now. But you know what really rich guys and gals like seeing? They like seeing their names on buildings that their kids, their grandkids, and their great-grandkids will see for generations to come. The fact that they're funding a quarterback who might win them a conference title, you know what? There's no proof of that in 10 years, 20 years. You got nothing to show for it outside of a couple attaboys and a couple of backslaps. So eventually, I think that's going to turn, and it's going to turn real fast. I'm Pete Mundo. We're Heartland College Sports. Thank you guys for being here. We are approaching a record on our live stream right now. So great stuff. Thank you guys for being a part of the show. As always, subscribe if you're on YouTube. We've got so much good content that's going to be coming your way. And if you are not a member, I'm going to tell this to everybody watching right now. If you are not a member of our Heartland College Sports forums, please check them out. They are free. We are building that Big 12 community. We're not looking for anything from you. We just want to get to know you, because my attitude has always been, we had, hundreds of thousands of you coming to this website every month, and I didn't know a lot of you. And we want to build that Big 12 community. So we're doing it on the Heartland College Sports forums. Go sign up now. Click on that forums tab. and we'll see you over there. Thank you, as always. Leave that 5-star rating and review on the podcast. Takes you all of 30 seconds. And subscribe on YouTube. We'll talk to you guys soon. Go Big 12. Have a great day.